Representative Tucker.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, I think we're ready to go. Good morning. Today is Wednesday, May 12th, and we are gathered as the Joint Standing Committee for the Environment and Natural Resources. We're here today for some work sessions, and we're going to go in this order. We're going to take up 909, 1163, 1467. And then we'll do all of the PFAS bills, which will be 960, 1503, 1505, and 1600. And then 676, 1488, and 1498. So it might be helpful if we write that into the chat so folks have a list of it. And I will do that in just a minute unless Sabrina is able to get to that. Let's go ahead and start with some introductions. Representative Bell, we'll start with you.
Good morning. Art Bell. I represent House District 47, which comprises Yarmouth, Chesapeake, and Long Island.
Representative Johansson.
Good morning. Chris Johansson, and I represent House District 145, the 18 organized towns between Bridgewater and Sherman.
Representative O'Connor.
Good morning. I'm Beth O'Connor. I represent the individuals of House District 5, which is Berwick and part of North Berwick.
And Representative Hanley.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Hanley. I represent District 87, which is Pittston, Alna, Westcasset, and Randolph.
And Representative Dudera.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vicki Dudera. I represent House District 94, the towns of Camden, Rockport, and the island of Islesboro. Thank you.
And Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I am Rick Bennett. I represent 13 towns in Cumberland and Oxford counties in the beautiful foothills and lakes region of Western Maine.
Thank you, Senator. And Representative Tucker.
Good morning. Ralph Tucker, House District 50, which is half of Brunswick, including the location of the Gulf of Maine bookstore.
And I'm Stacy Brenner, and I represent Senate District 30, which includes all of Gorham, most of Scarborough, and part of Buxton. And I suspect we'll see other members popping in and out. Folks seem to have lots going on today with other bills and work sessions and other committees. Representative Bloom's joined us once she gets her audio connected. Representative Bloom, we'll turn to you to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Senator Brenner. My name is Lydia Bloom. I represent House District 3 in New York.
Wonderful, welcome. Okay. Let's go ahead and open up a work session for LD 909. And Dan, we'll turn to you for that one to show us the amended language to start with.
So by way of reminder, we had, I think, more than one work session on this already. Mm-hmm. At the last work session, there was an amendment draft that had been proposed by some stakeholders and that had not been reviewed by myself or by the DEP, which the committee had asked to be providing some input on the matter. It was determined that the substance of the amendment could be addressed in a better way. And so I was asked to work with DEP to develop some language to meet that criteria. And Representative Tucker had directed me to prepare an amendment, which I have sent to you all. If it would be helpful, I can screen share it.
That'd be great. And also, I think we'll bring Mr. Rutherford over to share his thoughts about it as well.
So there's a slight change to the emergency preamble, just to be consistent with the amendment. So what it essentially does, you see there in section 1 of the bill is what the existing private and special law is. And so this amendment would retain the status quo, which is the 227-foot restriction on the level of the dam, unless a water level regime is established by ordinance adopted pursuant to a new subsection 2 here, a new section 2. And so what this section 2 does is essentially adopt the municipal ordinance provision by which a water level regime ordinance can be adopted by a municipality, subject to review and approval by the DEP commissioner. So this is an existing process provided for in law, and both Mr. Livesey from DEP and I worked on this language that we think is consistent both with the existing law and with the slightly different character of the Lucerne and Maine Village Corporation, which is sort of a quasi-municipal corporation. What this does is allows the Lucerne and Maine Village Corporation to adopt a water level ordinance in the same manner as a municipality, and authorizes them to enter into a interlocal agreement with the town of Dedham, so that there is agreement on the regulation of water levels and flows for Phillips Lake between the two entities. It sort of accepts from the current law the requirement that for an interlocal agreement, both entities have to adopt a water level ordinance. It says that the town of Dedham does not have to separately adopt a water level ordinance, that they can enter into an interlocal agreement using the same ordinance that's adopted by the Lucerne and Maine Village Corporation. You'll recall that the prior draft contained some language about liability and immunity. Per some discussions Representative Tucker and I had, that language is not included in this amendment. So I can answer any questions that you have about the amendment. My understanding is that the sponsor is comfortable with the amendment language, at least.
Okay. So Mr. Rutherford is here with us and Mr. Livesey, and we'll bring Mr. Let's see if he's here. Yes. Mr. Rutherford and Mr. Livesey, do you have any comments, and does the committee have any questions, feedback?
This is Lynn Rutherford. My only question was the reason why a liability section wasn't added. What was the reason for that?
Representative Tucker.
The liability language is not included in the original proposal. Secondly, the reference to the Maine Tort Claims Act was unnecessary and superfluous because it exists as it does anyway, and there's no reason to recite that in the proposal. And lastly, I was quite uncomfortable with the idea that the village was seeking what looked like absolute immunity from any kind of lawsuit. I'm not sure that would stand up in any case, but I thought it was inappropriate in a bill that was simply designed to regulate the water level. And therefore I asked the draftsman to drop that, because I would oppose this bill if that language were included.
Representative Tucker, is it your opinion then that Lucerne and Maine Village Corporation is covered by the Maine Torts Claims Act?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I would just like to say, Lynn Rutherford again, that we discussed the bill at the regular town meeting for the Village of Lucerne, and the overseers voted unanimously approval of the language as it exists. And I want to thank Mr. Tucker and of those who worked on it. We appreciate it.
All right, perhaps we're ready for a motion. Yes, Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move ought to pass as amended with Representative Tucker's amendment.
Second.
Is that a second, Representative O'Connor? All right, any further discussion? Okay, I believe we're ready for a vote. Mr. Rutherford and Mr. Livesay, I'm gonna send you all back on through. Thank you.
Senator, am I on the Zoom now?
You are, yes, welcome.
Would you like me to introduce myself?
We are, yes, why don't you please do that? And then we're gonna vote on LD 909, ought to pass as amended is the motion.
I am Representative Paige Ziegler. I represent District 96 in Waldo County, the 7 towns of Liberty. Oops, I lost my alphabetical order. Belmont, Liberty, Lincolnville, Montville, Morrill, Palermo, and Sears-Mont. Thank you.
Welcome, Representative. I'm gonna change your name for you. Sabrina, we're ready whenever you are.
Okay. All right. LD 960 ought to pass as amended. Senator Brenner.
Yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hanley.
Yes, did you say LD 960?
(909).
909.
I apologize.
Okay, 909, yes, I'm in favor.
Senator Carney. Absent. Representative Bell.
Yes.
Representative Bloom. Absent. Representative Dudera.
Yes.
Representative Gramlich. Absent.
Thank you, said me. Yes.
Representative Johansson.
Yes.
Representative Toole. Absent. Representative Ziegler.
Yes.
Also requires
9 yes, 4 absent.
Great, wonderful,
Madam
everyone.
Chair,
Yes. Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a very poor audio and visual connection here. Are you experiencing the same thing?
I'm not. Do you want to try to reconnect?
No, I can see and hear myself and a few of the people, but I actually am not seeing a majority of the people voting, and I'm wondering if a clerk is seeing them. I believe
Yeah.
you have to be,
I can see everybody.
okay, because I'm only 30 feet away from my clerk, and I have a terrible connection going on here.
Okay. Okay, so with that, we'll close the work session for 909. And we'll move on to a work session for 1163, which is the ban on metallic mineral mining. My understanding is that, yes, Representative Tucker.
Yes, I received a phone call from the sponsor, and she asked that we table it for another time because she has been unable to reach the DEP. I called the DEP to see what the matter was, and a meeting is being arranged. Therefore, I'd like to table this bill. I move to table.
Is there a second?
Second.
Show of hands. All right. So I think that is everyone but Representative Hanley. And Representative Dudera says yes.
Yes, I move not to table. I don't support the tabling motion. We're too late in the game. We're at the end of this. I would oppose the tabling motion.
Okay.
Not to belabor this, but this isn't the first time that the DEP has been a little bit slow to meet with legislators on pending legislation. So I just out of courtesy to the legislature, that's why I voted for that. Although I admit that tabling motions are non-debatable, particularly after the fact, so forgive me.
Noted. Yes, Dan.
I had not been anticipating a tabling motion, so I will note that if anyone would like to read it, I did just send out my bill analysis, which we hadn't gone over yet. So it's got some really interesting stuff in there.
Was that a sarcastic remark?
I'm never sarcastic.
We won't let your hard work go to waste. We'll all make sure to read it before the end of the day. Okay. We'll close the hearing on work session on 1163 and moving right along to LD 1467, which is our own Representative Dudera's bill about recycled content in plastic bottles. So I believe this is our first work session on this bill. Is that right? Yeah, so we'll start with Dan's analysis.
So I just emailed you an analysis as well as a proposed amendment from the sponsor. LD 1467 is an act to promote a circular economy through increased post-consumer recycled content plastic beverage containers. The bill provides that beginning January 1st, 2026, a manufacturer of beverages in plastic beverage containers may not sell, offer for sale, or distribute for sale in the state a plastic beverage container unless the total number of plastic beverage containers sold, offered for sale, or distributed for sale in the state by that manufacturer contains on average and in the aggregate at least 25% post-consumer recycled plastic. That requirement increases to 30% post-consumer content beginning January 1st, 2031. The bill also requires the DEP to administer and enforce these provisions and authorizes the DEP to assess administrative penalties against the non-compliant manufacturer based on the weight in pounds of plastic beverage containers sold by that manufacturer that are not in compliance. I've listed for you the entities that testified for, against, or neither for nor against the bill. The first note I wanted to share was a suggestion by the DEP regarding the administration of the program. It was unclear to DEP whether the revenue generated through the annual reporting fees and waiver requests will offset anticipated administrative costs of the new program. They suggested using existing enforcement authorities and mechanisms currently in place for other programs instead of the new complex and resource-intensive administrative mechanisms proposed in the bill. There was testimony from the Wine Institute proposing an exclusion for 187 milliliter wine bottles, plastic wine bottles, from the requirements of the bill, or alternatively exempting wine manufacturers that are shipping less than 200,000 kilograms of PET plastic containers into Maine in the previous year. I've noted here that the bill proposes in new 1612 4D, a new public records exception. So pursuant to Title I, Section 434, if a majority of the committee supports a version of the proposal that contains a new public records exception, the proposal must be submitted to the Judiciary Committee for review. I've included a couple notes here of my own. I've noted that the term manufacturer, as well as the term refillable in the bill, cross-reference definitions that are in the bottle bill law. The problem, though, is that the bottle bill law definitions use terms that are defined in both the bottle bill law and in this new program, such as manufacturer, making it unclear which definition of manufacturer applies. There's one in the bottle bill as well. So the solution here that I've suggested is to just bring the substance of those definitions into the bill rather than use cross-references. I've also noted here that the definition of post-consumer recycled plastic in the bill uses the terms post-industrial plastic or pre-consumer plastic. Those terms are not defined, and I'm wondering if the committee feels there's a need to define those terms, or if they are industry understood terms or terms that the department would not have an issue addressing. There's no fiscal determination yet, and I will note that there is an amendment from the sponsor that you all received this morning. I have not had a chance to review that amendment in any real depth, and it's not clear to me in the amendment what parts of the bill are being amended or not. So I understand the sponsor can speak to that. I can answer any questions you have about my analysis, though, or the original bill.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, Senator Bennett.
So Dan, I understand then that some of these issues, you don't know yet whether the issues you flagged relating to drafting actually will flow into concerns into the amendment if we choose to follow that course?
I did have a chance to give a quick review to the amendment. I believe those two slight technical issues I noted are still present, and in fact, the issue of cross-referencing bottle bill definitions looks to be even greater in the amendment, which incorporates a number of additional terms from the bottle bill law and also seeks to regulate, rather than, I think, manufacturers of plastic bottles, it regulates the term initiator of deposit under the bottle law, which is a very broad term and includes distributors and dealers of bottles, which could pull in retailers such as Hannaford's or supermarkets, and it's unclear to me how that would work with the rest of the proposal. But like I said, I haven't had much of a chance to review the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Dudera, are you in a position to be able to speak to the amendment?
Yes, hi, thank you very much, Senator Brenner. I can certainly try. Let me just call up my notes here quickly on it. And I do apologize for the last minute nature. It seems to be how these things happen a little bit. So I'm just going to go through and just quickly say what we have changed. And then there's people certainly in the room who can answer some of the specific questions as well. But we did go to initiator of deposit and not the manufacturer, because this makes it consistent with our bottle bill, and we felt it would make the DEP enforcement more manageable. So, and the definitions of distributor, dealer, and initiator of deposit were taken from section 3102. In section 2, the initiators of deposit are required to meet the threshold or pay a post-consumer recycled plastic content requirement fee. In section 4, we increased the registration fee to $500. The initiator of deposit is responsible for filing the annual report with the DEP, but it may have another entity like a bottler, distributor, or manufacturer file the appropriate annual report. The DEP can require an initiator to pay for a third-party verifier. Smaller initiator of deposits, so those are folks that do less than 10,000 plastic containers. They will still have to register and pay any applicable post-consumer content requirement fees, but they do not have to pay the registration fee. So this is partially addresses the claims that were made by the Wine Institute. And it also helps those large wine distributors that only do a small amount of plastic sales in our state. They would be eligible for a waiver of the registration fee. Let's see. The FDA has reviewed and compiled a list of circumstances where material comes in contact with food. The FDA has approved a number of processes for use of rPET that are compatible with a bottle filled with wine, regardless of the size. So the FDA doesn't consider things like flavor, taste, or odor. So, and just as an aside, we do know that those very small containers are difficult to recycle because they're very small and they're too small for the screens that most municipal recycling facilities have, and they fall through as contaminants. In section 5, initiators of deposit will report each year to the DEP, and they will calculate and remit to the DEP any applicable post-consumer recycled plastic content requirement fees that are due. And rather than the DEP calculating this amount, it's the responsibility of the initiator of deposit. The penalty is now called a fee. And we did this because it's more workable for the DEP and consistent with their existing enforcement mechanisms. Section 6 is new. That's the standard DEP enforcement mechanism for non-compliance. The DEP has authority to remove a product from sale if the initiator does not register or does not pay the registration fee or post-consumer recycled plastic content requirement fee. And that's similar to DEP authority already for initiators of deposit that don't comply with the returnable container law. And section 7, an individual initiator of deposit can request a waiver of the requirement fee if they can demonstrate that anomalous market conditions exist. And these are things that are a disruption in the supply of the post-consumer recycled plastic or a lack of the plastic. And this was in the similar, this language was in the original LD, but it's been redrafted at the DEP's request so as to be more specific about the conditions that would permit a waiver. An initiator of deposit must submit a $100 processing fee with that request for a waiver, and the burden is on the initiator of deposit to provide documentation to justify it. Failure to respond to DEP requests for information or failure to provide sufficient documentation is not reviewable, and the DEP does not need to report on how the funds were expended, but the funds are going to be deposited in the main environmental protection fund, and there will be a line item so we know how many fees we are collecting. So I should be coming back to you guys. There I am. So I think if we've got, Dan still has specific questions, they could perhaps be asked to other people on the line. We have a representative from the Maine Beverage Association, and we also, I'm sure Paula Clark is on the line too.
Great. Thank you, Representative Dudera. Are there any questions for Representative Dudera? I'll bring Ms. Clark over and also. And the representative from the Beverage Association, if you could raise your hand. No, there you are. Sorry, Mr. Auger. Okay. Great. Any questions from the committee? Any thoughts? Concerns? Yes, Representative Hanley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little cautious. I'd like to review this amendment with a little more time. I'm thinking of a tabling motion. I'm not making it now, but a last minute amendment of this size, I'd like to have more time to look at. The wine people, I don't think are in the waiting room to speak. Are they? Anyone from, I think her name was Carol. Carol Martell, was she in the waiting room to speak?
I don't see her. No.
Oh, the main beverage people, are they here?
They are, yes. That's Mr. Auger. He's in this space with us now.
Well, Newell Auger is here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't represent
that
the
would help
line,
if we
I
heard
represent
from him.
Hanley.
I know you don't, but
Okay.
I would like to hear what you think about the amendment, if we could do that.
Well, first off, we appreciate, again, Representative Dudera's efforts to bring as many parties as she could into this discussion. And obviously, we're one of my members of the larger, or if not the largest, producers of plastic for beverage containers, and so we want to be part of the solution. That's why we're at the table, and we're appreciative of the opportunity. We think this amendment is a balanced approach forward. It I think addresses a number of the concerns that the department had. So maybe it's probably more appropriate for Paula Clark to speak to that. But I think two of the biggest changes are instead of the responsible party being the manufacturer, the responsible party is the initiator deposit. And I suspect if you ask Ms. Clark, she'll tell you that would have been difficult for the department to track down the manufacturer because those entities can be so many steps removed from the state of Maine. And from discussions with the department, I think they were much more comfortable using the existing structure they have with the bottle bill, where they have initiators here in the state. The initiator deposit is essentially the last person to introduce the product into the state. And so that's the entity that the department needs to have responsible. That entity may not necessarily, Representative Hanley, have the information. They may need to go to their bottler or to their distributor to get that information. But I think I certainly can understand from Ms. Clark's position. They don't want to have to, be chasing those folks down. They want the entity that's in the state to operate and to be responsible to file. I think the other major change, although I don't know necessarily if it's major, Dan may disagree with me on this, but we had initially characterized these the post-consumer recycled content requirement as a penalty. And I think for the department's purposes, that's very difficult for them. It raises a whole bunch of other issues. They want to characterize this as a fee that the initiators will pay and put the burden on the initiators to do that. So rather than the department calculating a penalty and dunning the initiator to pay it, the responsibility is clearly on the initiator every year in April to look back across their portfolio for the territory that they want to report for, and in April provide that information, the report, if you will. We are at 23% or 27%, hopefully. And then pay any appropriate fee along with that report. And I think that's a significant change. Although technically, it's just a difference of putting the onus on the initiator deposit to provide the information and to provide the fee. I think there are some other changes to the waiver that were made that the department requested. I think and again, I don't want to speak for Ms. Clark, but I feel like I'm doing that, but she's been very busy the last 3 days. There were some changes to the waiver that, and that I will say that was a very important part of this amendment for us is individual initiators having the ability to ask for a waiver of the penalty in the event of a disruption in supply. There was, as I think in my testimony I mentioned, there was a major distributor of rPET or producer of rPET that went belly up. And if you were a manufacturer or initiator trying to get rPET and your plans basically just fallen through with that bankruptcy. So we wanted that waiver in there, and I think the department was very understanding of that, but they wanted some guardrails around how the waiver is requested. And so there are some additions to section 7. I think that Representative Dudera alluded to the $100 processing fee, some language that protects the department against a waiver request that where the initiator doesn't provide the information that they need to provide, and a more concise definition of what anomalous market conditions mean. And that means essentially either a disruption in the supply or a lack of supply for an initiator to comply with the threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Auger. Representative Hanley, did you have additional questions, follow-up questions?
No, that clears it up for me. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Auger.
Representative Tucker, did you have
Thank
a
you.
question?
I was going to ask if we could ask Paula Clark if she could go over the department's concerns
Great.
with the bill and how they were handled, and whether this will work administratively.
Thank you. Good morning. Newell had pointed out several of the major changes that were made to the bill, but in general, our concerns were around, there were several places in the original bill where the department would be in the position of having to gather and analyze a lot of data, including market data, to make determinations about such things as waivers. And so in the amendment, there has been a shift made in a couple of different locations where the burden of providing the relevant information, gathering the information, and providing it to the department, that burden has shifted. So it would be now the initiators of deposit versus the department who was engaged in that research and some of the analysis. The waiver provision initially was pretty complex, and as we talked through it, we found several different ways to simplify it, and that was one of them. We talked a lot as a group. We met several times. Newell DEP representatives, Representative Dudera, Sarah Nichols from NRCM, and Bree Deatley was part of our conversation. So we met a variety of times and made a series of changes to the draft over the past couple of weeks. We talked a lot about who the responsible party should be in this system. Originally, it talked about manufacturers. And as Newell outlined for you, we were concerned that manufacturers may, in some cases, be very difficult to track down. They may be out-of-state entities over which the state doesn't have direct authority. And so ultimately, there was agreement among the group that using the existing initiator of deposit system would help in that regard. And as Newell also mentioned, they may not always have all of the information that is required for reporting, but they would be in a position to be able to get that from others quite easily. Another significant concern that the department had was about the penalty structure and enforcement. In testimony, that was one of the points that we raised, and that was that we wanted to see the enforcement and compliance system shift more toward existing systems that the department already uses in other programs within the agency. And there was excuse me, there was a lot of discussion around that issue, but ultimately that's what this draft reflects. There is a reference to section 349, which is the department's general enforcement authority. And the fees for not complying with the recycled content requirement. And there is an expectation that there will be a number of parties who simply cannot comply with this because of the supply of recycled plastic. That is now structured as a system of fees. There's a calculation that is carried over from the original bill on what the amount of those fees would be. So those are reflective of the extent of the deviation of a particular IOD's plastic bottles from the standard that's outlined in the bill. I'm sure there may be some persistent technical issues. Dan had mentioned that some cross-referencing of definitions and so forth. And I know at least one or two cases he'd mentioned that it might be useful to draw a definition rather than cross-reference it, bring it directly into this bill. And we're certainly supportive of that if he thinks it would make it clearer. The final issue I'd mention, I guess, is that there really did not appear to be a way to calculate what the expected fee revenue from this program would be. And I don't know that that would be possible until the program is actually underway. We can calculate the number of IODs and what their registration fee would be. But in terms of the other fees that are reflective of non-compliance with the standard, there really isn't a good way to calculate that presently that I can see. I think those are the major issues. I'd be happy to try to address any other issues or questions that you might have.
I have one quick question for you under the technical notes section. Can you tell us your thoughts around the term post-industrial plastic or pre-consumer plastic and whether they should be defined?
I think that there would be those that argue that they don't need to be defined, but I can certainly understand that there would be parties who would want to see them defined. So I'd be supportive of that. I think including a definition might be appropriate.
Okay. Representative Tucker?
My question is, I don't see in this draft anywhere a clause dealing with confidential information, which might come in conflict with the Freedom of Information Act. And I don't know if Ms. Clark is the right person to ask, but I couldn't find it in here. It might be buried in somewhere that I missed, but I'm concerned on whether or not you would be collecting information that could be considered confidential or not. I don't know if it would require the divulging of confidential information or arguably confidential information.
Mr. Auger, I think, would like to answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Judge Tucker. I appreciate that on behalf of our members. That language is in section 4, part D. It's kind of squished up to the top of the page, but it has the boilerplate language about proprietary information, and that information will be handled in a confidential manner similar to that under section 3119. But I appreciate the diligence on your part to look for that.
Yes, and you have located it for me. That completely satisfies my concern. Thank you.
But thank you for the question and for the due diligence. Much appreciated.
Representative Hanley.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Senator. I generally support this proposition, but I'm going to ask for tabling because I see so many kind of things that are not nailed down properly. And there's some parties I think that would like to still look at this. So I make a motion this be tabled.
Dan?
Sorry, before that, didn't want to jump in there before it gets tabled. I did just want to note that, as I said before, initiator of deposit is a somewhat complex term, and I know we haven't dealt with that much this session. As I understand it, it also includes, in the case of wine and spirits, the Bureau of Alcoholic Beverages and Lottery Operations. BABLO is considered the initiator of deposit for the state. So there's a fairly complex contract that they have with Pine State for the exclusive distribution of liquor, as we are a control state for liquor. I don't know how this reporting requirement, which is still in the amendment phrased as a sales prohibition, if you don't meet those requirement standards or the payment of fees, how that might affect that as well. We had, because this is sort of a recycled bill from last session or from last legislature, we had some discussions about shifting to initiator of deposit as the regulated entity, and there were a number of unanswered questions at that time. I'm not really able to speak to that in any depth because I hadn't prepared for it today because I just got the amendment this morning, but I think that may still be an outstanding issue, how this would apply in the IOD context.
Madam Chair, I think my tabling motion has gained some acceleration with Dan's statement, so I stand by the motion to table. I think there are some questions that still need to be ironed out. As I said, I generally support this legislation. I think it needs some fine tuning.
Is there a second for the tabling motion?
I'll second it.
A show of hands? All right. All right. I believe that's everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, we table 1467 and we'll pick it up another day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Representative Dudera. Okay, I'm going to send Mr. Auger
Thanks,
and
everybody.
Paula Clark and Newell Auger back through the portal. Thank you both for joining us. Okay, and with that, we will move on to the suite of PFAS bills. And Dan, I will turn to you. I think that the goal here is to try to incorporate 960 into 1505, correct?
I'm not sure what the goal is, but
so that I think the goal is that we will let 960 go and we will use 1505 as the vehicle for the work that we can get done in 960.
So 960 had two distinct provisions, one about the firefighting foam and one about the PFAS product reporting that are sort of broken in two between 1503 and 1505. So it sounds like you're suggesting to consider the aspects of 960 in the context of those two other bills.
Exactly.
So perhaps a motion on 960 is what we're expecting?
Right.
Okay.
Are people comfortable with that? Yes, Senator Bennett.
I'm comfortable with it, and it will in fact show my level of comfort by moving ought not to pass a 960.
Second.
Is the committee ready for a vote? Any discussion? Okay, we're ready for a vote. Sabrina, are you with us? Great, welcome.
All right. Senator Brenner.
Yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hanley, absent. Senator Carney, absent. Representative Bell,
Yes.
Representative Bloom, absent. Representative Dudera,
Yes.
Representative Gramlich, absent. Representative Johansson,
Yes.
Representative O'Connor,
Yes.
Representative Toole, absent. Representative Ziegler.
Yes.
And Sabrina, I believe that Representative Gramlich has joined us. And Representative Gramlich, right now we're on 960 and the motion is ought not to pass. And
Thank you. Thank you.
vote, and then we'll have you introduce yourself.
The motion is ought not to pass.
Correct.
I vote yes.
Okay.
And I am Lori Gramlich. I represent House District 13, which is indeed the lovely seaside community of Old Orchard Beach. And pardon my tardiness, I was in a couple different committees this morning. Thank you.
Okay. So that was a unanimous ought not to pass for those present?
It was 9 yes, 4 absent.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so with that, let's open up a work session for LD 1503. And oh my goodness, hold on, I have to get to the right screen here. Dan, do you want to start us off? 1503. Everyone
Sure.
should have received amendment language for that bill.
So I sent an amendment as well as an analysis, which I can go through if you'd like.
Sure.
So LD 1503 is an act to stop PFAS pollution. The bill requires manufacturers of products with intentionally added PFAS to report the presence of those substances in those products to the DEP beginning in 2023. The bill also prohibits the sale of residential carpets or rugs, as well as the sale of fabric treatments that contain intentionally added PFAS beginning in 2023. Additional product categories containing intentionally added PFAS may also be identified by the department and prohibited from sale. Effective in 2030, products containing intentionally added PFAS may not be sold unless the use of PFAS in a product is specifically designated as a currently unavoidable use by the DEP. The DEP is required to create a PFAS source reduction program that provides information, education, and to the extent funds are available, grants to publicly owned treatment works and municipalities to reduce PFAS entering air, water, or land. I've indicated for you the proponents, opponents, and those testifying either for or against the bill. I'll skip the first note because we already disposed of 960 and jump to the second. The DEP noted some concerns regarding the expectations of and additional resources required for the PFAS source reduction program under new 1612-9, which would duplicate some of the work already being done by manufacturers and duplicate work that DEP is already doing with wastewater treatment facilities on pretreatment for PFAS. There were multiple opponents of the bill who argued that regulating the entire class of PFAS in the bill, which contains over 9,000 different substances. I've noted here there was some discrepancy about how many PFAS there actually are. The lowest number that anyone cited was 1,000, but they are used in a wide range of consumer and industrial applications, is overly broad and lacks a scientific basis. This could undermine effective product design in a variety of industries and in some cases, overall product safety. Although it was acknowledged that the bill contains a waiver provision for notification and a process for a DEP determination of unavoidable use for an otherwise prohibited product containing PFAS, it was suggested by these bill opponents that due to the overbroad scope, DEP might be inundated with thousands of waiver and exemption requests. There was specific testimony from Twin Rivers Paper Company, expressing concern that the provision in new 1612(5)(c), which allows DEP to prohibit by rule the sale of products containing intentionally added PFAS, does not contain a starting date for that authority, raising concerns that a prohibition under that provision may occur at any time after enactment. In response to some member questions, Twin Rivers noted that the FDA has required a phase out of PFAS in food packaging by the end of 2023 and suggested that its concerns would be addressed by aligning the DEP's rulemaking authority under this provision with that phase out timeframe. And I assume this to mean that rules could not be adopted until the beginning of 2024 to prohibit additional products. The Maine Dairy Industry Association recommended that further details be provided in new 1612 subsection 9 regarding the stakeholders to be consulted with by the DEP in the development of the PFAS source reduction program. I would defer to the sponsor, who I understand worked with some other stakeholders, including the DEP, on the amendment, but that was included for you as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the analysis or the original bill.
Are there any questions for Dan? And any comments, any questions for the sponsor? Yes, Representative Gramlich.
Thank you, Senator. I think it might be helpful if, I know there's some folks in the waiting room, I'm not sure if the department is lingering out there in the cyberspace world, but we, myself and some of the advocates had a pretty robust conversation yesterday with David Burns, as well as Carrie Malinowski, about all three of the PFAS bills. And we did a bit of work on trying to reach some agreement, which I believe we all did, in terms of timeframes and language. And I think it would be really helpful if we could bring in, I see Carrie on the screen. I don't know if Dave, and I see Dave just popped up. I also know that we have a couple of folks from Defend Our Health that have been doing a lot of work on this and helped negotiate this agreement. Sarah Woodbury, hi Carrie, Sarah Woodbury and Patrick McElroy are also, I think, in the waiting room. I think it would just be really helpful that we all are hearing from everybody on the same page, with your indulgence. Thank you.
Representative Gramlich, what was the person you mentioned after Sarah Woodbury?
Patrick McElroy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Perhaps either Carrie Malinowski or David Burns, you all could speak to the DEP's concerns so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having us here at the work session. And, we certainly appreciate the efforts of Representative Gramlich and Defend Our Health to collaborate and pull together a combination of LD 960 and 1503 specifically. Some of our concerns involved the sales prohibition language and some of the rulemaking and the heavy lift that the department would be under in order to implement some of that, just to make sure that, it's said out loud, we agree with the objective of source reduction. We're very interested in that. Currently, the department is focused on managing contamination and cleanup, and we have a lot of resources dedicated to that. And this particular bill would see a fiscal note attached to some of the rulemaking and implementation components of it. It's a significant commitment to undertake rulemaking to determine all unavoidable uses and to maintain its current overview of what an unavoidable use is and which products would fall under that. At this point, some of that is beyond the department's capacity to manage. One of the concerns that we also had, was determining that universe of products and those categories. So we're glad to see that there was an adjustment to make part of Section 5, Section 5D, I believe it was, major substantive. That's helpful. And a modification to the source reduction program to make it something that the department could pursue if we have the resources available is helpful. Though we believe that that effort is already underway in some other areas of the department, and so while we agree in concept with that, it would be a difficult undertaking for the department to manage that program as currently written. One thing that I did want to mention is that Representative Tucker, I heard you earlier mention confidentiality with another bill, the previous bill that you were talking about. This was a miss on my part, so I apologize, but the confidentiality piece that was in LD 960 wasn't transferred over to 1503. So I just wanted to point that out. That was something that that was, again, a miss on my part, so I apologize, but something that we would be interested in seeing transferred over to 1503. So, that's a basic overview. We did talk about Section 7 and using the language from 960 in Section 7, and I think in the draft that we have in front of us that hadn't been moved over specifically yet, just because I think it was this morning that we were communicating about that. So I just wanted to make sure that that we talked about that as well.
Representative Tucker, did you want to chime in with a question?
Yes, I would. I would like to ask Ms. Milanowski. She expressed a number of hesitations based on funding. I would like to ask her to, if we set aside the funding issue and leave that for the Appropriations Committee or leave that for further discussion, set that aside completely, because I don't want the hesitation about funding to affect an analysis of whether this is a workable amendment. And I want to ask you directly, will this work administratively as drafted?
Well, I can tell you through my 9 years of experience implementing our safer chemicals programs that it is extremely challenging to chase enforcement in a universe of the supply chain that is incredibly vast. So many times when I'm trying to get in touch with manufacturers to determine whether or not they are in compliance or how they might become in compliance, it is it's incredibly challenging is a light way of putting it. So very often they are international companies. There is difficulty reaching them and making determinations about compliance with them, and products change. They can change pretty quickly. So that's a considerable challenge in administration. And then we're talking about, determining whether or not there's appropriate lab analysis available for us and how we would make that determination. So that could be challenging. While we agree with the concept of source reduction, we do have a limited capacity at the department to implement.
May I follow up, please?
Yes, of course.
That doesn't answer my question.
Mm-hmm.
I know administration is tough. It's tough in any bill.
Yeah.
There's always problems in administering something.
Sure.
My question is to set aside your frustrations about resources. Is there anything in this bill that would prevent implementation, given adequate resources.
Well, I think the department carrying the responsibility of making a determination about all current unavoidable uses is going to be difficult for us. That's going to be a significant undertaking, and I see that as a very considerable challenge for us. I think, if we had all of the resources available necessary to implement, there are many times when the department is faced with challenges, in statute that, that we rise to the occasion and follow through with the mandate. And so, if given all of the resources necessary to implement, I think, it's possible to do that. But I would just remind the committee that that's a heavy lift. We're looking at the potential of a full FTE for some of this, and a lot of extensive rulemaking. So it would be a considerable amount of time and expertise necessary.
Well,
Representative Tucker, do you have additional follow-up?
I don't hear any specific objection to any of the provisions in here. I'm just hearing some grumbling about how it might be difficult. And I think those are separate issues. I don't think our conversation's going anywhere. Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to subscribe thoroughly to what Representative Tucker was just saying. I'm trying to understand whether this bill, it works. And I have to say that as it's currently drafted, it has multiple levels. Just take Section 9, for example. Multiple levels of optionality provided to the department, which I don't even agree with. I mean, the changing of shall to may under Section 9 gives ultimate discretion to the department as to whether they even do a source reduction program. And I would like to see the shall stay, the may go, and it clearly is modified by the words to the extent funds are available. So that there's plenty of discretion in that without adding to the discretion on total optionality with respect to changing a shall to a may. This is a critical problem that we're facing, and I know the department shares the concern and the sense of urgency about dealing with this. But I think the frustration is the legislature, through this committee and others, are asking, okay, how can we best to tackle this? What is the best way as policymakers for us to pass laws and then empower the department to get this done? And it's a little frustrating to do this, but I mean, I would like to say very clearly that this is a priority for the legislature, and we need to know what the funding's requirement. You said 1 FTE, Ms. Malinowski, and okay, 1 FTE. So I don't know, maybe there's another one tucked in somewhere else with some other aspect of this, but I mean, I think this bill's, the amendment's a little weak, frankly, in terms of the discretion given to the department. I would like to see a little bit more insistence by the legislature about what we want the executive branch to do in this area. And I certainly don't want to do that in a way, though, that is totally undoable, unenforceable. But I share the frustration. So I guess there's not much of a question there. I did note also that the language regarding stakeholders is taken out in consultation with relevant stakeholders. I'm a little uneasy about that, but you know, given the discretion afforded, I think you know, I think maybe that is something that the department will try to do anyway. But that's where I'm coming down on this. I like this bill. Like to see whatever in 960 we need to add to it, if anything, and then let's get this ought to pass.
Representative Gramlich, thank you, Senator Bennett. Representative Gramlich, did you have any specific questions or comments for Sarah Woodbury or Patrick McRoy?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Excuse me. You know, I as we try to negotiate and kind of reach consensus on a product that all parties, the department and advocates, and certainly we as elected members can kind of follow and agree upon to move a piece of legislation, you know, I was willing to examine some of the language that was put forward by the department, although personally I tend to agree with Senator Bennett relative to, you know, kind of having some stronger language within the amendment. I'd like to hear what Mr. McElroy thinks about that in terms of PFAS overall and how we get this toxic chemical out of products.
Sure. I'm Patrick McElroy. I'm the Deputy Director at Defend Our Health. And I think the 1503 overall represents a very significant step forward for Maine to actually prevent the next rounds of contamination. So I know this committee's spent a lot of effort trying to sort out how do we deal with the remediation and the aftermath. And this bill is really our, I think, best hope in Maine of actually preventing the next round of pollution by trying to address its presence. And I certainly, appreciate the workload that could be put on the department. But I think this really represents the direction that we need to go in order to be able to actually determine where PFAS is absolutely unavoidable, because there are applications, and I know you heard quite a bit of testimony at the public hearing on it about applications, including in medical devices, where there may not be an immediately available alternative. So we, want to make sure that we're not prohibiting everything when there aren't good alternatives, but that we still are getting rid of most of it that's going to be entering the environment. And unfortunately, no one else is able to make that determination. It needs to fall on some entity, and that is DEP. So there definitely will be a workload there. The pollution prevention efforts, I think, are important, and obviously we're part of the bill. DEP was concerned about the workload and overlap with other programs, so we were trying to, in negotiations, retain the flexibility there for them to be able to do that. We certainly want to see efforts to help folks be able to find the alternatives and be able to address upstream sources of PFAS that are entering publicly owned treatment works, et cetera. So I think that is all very important. But I, leave it to the committee, to sort of figure out is that, sufficient with the existing DEP programs and opportunities. I think we also, one of the reasons we had originally included that in Section 9 was to tie some of the funding that was coming in through the fees on product manufacturers to being able to operate some of these programs. So that was part of the rationale behind that. And then finally, I would just say in terms of some of the confidentiality concerns, we tend to believe that as consumers of various products, we should have the opportunity to know whether or not they contain PFAS. So we really prefer a higher degree of transparency in terms of what information is available and known about what PFAS are within products for sale in Maine. think that represents
Thank
where we're at.
you. Thank you, Mr. McRoy. Are there questions? Yes, Representative Tucker. You're muted, Representative.
I'd like to make a motion ought to pass as amended in the language that we have in front of us. And then I'd like to speak to my motion.
Is there a second? Senator Bennett, seconds. Go ahead.
This draft makes considerable concessions to give the DEP more discretion, and I can suffer those. They do need some discretion, but the hesitancy that I've heard expressed from the DEP is not for any specific clause or difficulty in here in the legal language. It's simply that it would be a lot of work, and I'm ready to give the DEP a lot of work. We can deal with the resources. We should face the resources. We can't pass major programs and not give them the resources. And if the state won't give them the resources off the appropriations table, that's a policy decision. I know that, we deal with these things at the last minute, but we have to get moving on this. I think it's time to pass this bill. Was basically an administration bill initially. This was 960 with some additions to make it a little more powerful. So I think we should go ahead and pass it today and get it up onto the floor, get it on the appropriations table, and see if our colleagues in other parts of the government or other parts of the legislature will go along with it and to put our money where our mouth is. I think the time to do it is now. And I think they've done a lot of work on this case over the last couple of weeks. And I feel that we can trust this work. I don't think we want to change the mays back to shalls. I think it's been worked out as the DEP has got as much as they can get. I think we just let this go and let the resources be worked out later. Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. I think every person who is now in state government or was in state government should feel a huge obligation to move on this. I mean, the testimony we heard, when was it? Monday, last week? I guess it was last month, Friday. Just stunning to me how much cost and pain we've inflicted on so many people around this state. And I think we have a moral obligation to deal with this as state officials. And I think the DEP has a moral obligation, frankly, to do this as aggressively as possible, to request the funds, to divert funds from other things, to clean up these problems that were inflicted largely because of state action or inaction. And so I subscribe. I was pleased to second the motion, and I'm sorry that Representative Tucker doesn't feel as strongly as I do about the shall versus the may, but I think we should put a stake in the ground, frankly, on that question. The legislature's job is to direct policy. Yes, there's already the clause there that says, pending funding. I think that's enough. I think we should say if the funding is there, this is not discretionary. Source reduction is imperative. And again, our job then is to provide the funding. And I think we should, though, insist on that piece. And so I would really like to see that shall replace the may. And I gather from Representative Tucker's comments that he wouldn't consider that to be friendly to his motion, but that is certainly where I am. So thank you.
Representative Tucker, is that an offer of a friendly amendment, Senator Bennett?
Well, I already presupposed based on his comments, I didn't want to put him in a position, but
I think the senator is correct. I think there's a big difference between shall and may. A huge difference about what's doable. And I think we should stick with the language that we have here that was talked about between the parties and just leave it at that. Thank you.
Dan, did you have a comment?
So as I noted, I only got the language this morning. I would anticipate there may be some hopefully technical issues that would come up if this were supported by committee members that I would have an opportunity to try to correct, perhaps with some consultation with whatever stakeholders you want me to work with. But this question of shall versus may, in my mind, is more of a technical issue. If we were, in just a general context, if we were to implement a program that was subject to fund availability, it would be a shall to the extent funds are available. If it's a may, there's no need to put any information about funding. It's completely discretionary. So from a technical perspective, to say may to the extent funds are available would not be how we would normally draft it. I don't know if that helps anything. It probably doesn't. But anyways, there's technical issues that I would like to have an opportunity to address.
Representative O'Connor.
Thank you, Senator. So I'm also I think that the word should be changed to shall. It's not going to stop me from voting on this legislation because I think it's important. And I'm also not really concerned about the funding. I know that there is a lot of funding that's coming our way. And I think that there's not a single legislator that is serving at this time that doesn't understand how important this issue is. And again, I'm not worried about the work either, because I think some of this work should have already been started. And another question that I had, is there an emergency preamble on this?
Not currently.
No. So I think that the sooner the better that we get working on that. And I would like to offer a friendly amendment that speaks to an emergency preamble on this.
The effective dates are set in January of 23. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What a preamble would help with what?
A preamble would help bring this to the table and get it enacted faster and have people be able to start working on it faster.
Representative
Hanley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I know that there's always some problems trying to start something like this, but it needs to start, even if it's not perfect. And so I support the pending motion, and I like the idea of an emergency preamble. And I don't think the department is going to have to worry about funding. I think funding is going to flow to this problem very quickly. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Representative Gramlich.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate it, Dan, the way you kind of framed up shall and may in terms of if funds are appropriate. And so, and I really appreciate Senator Bennett's friendly amendment, as well as input from both Representative O'Connor and Representative Hanley. I personally am perfectly comfortable with having the word shall, with a caveat if funds are available by the department, included into the final iteration of the bill.
Representative Tucker.
Yes, I'd like to change my motion slightly to incorporate an emergency enactment and also to restore the word shall with the modification language within budgetary limitations, or whatever the appropriate technical language is that they use for that. Thank you.
if you need the second's approval to that friendly, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. I have a question for either Patrick McRoy or for Carrie Malinowski. Can you explain to me why the line about relevant stakeholder consultation was removed?
Where is that?
That's in section 9.
Section 9. I think I probably was the one who made that change, and it was the concern I had heard from the department was the resources around section 9, and as part of our negotiations, I said I would make section 9 simpler and optional for them, so that I just took that out with the idea that if it was optional anyway, and it would cost them resources to have to consult. But I didn't explicitly actually discuss, I don't think we explicitly discussed that. So it seems like the department's trying to ignore people. I want to take responsibility for making that change to simplify it, not to ignore people.
No ignoring happening here. But thanks, Patrick.
I would like us to consider putting that back in. Any comments from the committee?
I support that, Senator. And I don't know if that's another friendly amendment that you're proposing to make. I'm not trying to chair your committee, but I am in full support of that.
Okay. Representative Tucker?
That's okay with me. I just am not sure how to articulate that. I wonder if Dan has enough information to take it to his drafting room.
I think we're talking about simply just removing the strike through.
Yep.
About consultation with relevant stakeholders in subsection 9.
Yep. I want to encourage people to be at the table.
Okay, very well. Let's add that in.
An additional question that I have about some of the technical pieces around parts of 960 that weren't included. Dan, can you speak to those?
I was going to bring that up too, because it wasn't clear to me if the motion was intended to include that, or if there was agreement. I know that it was mentioned there was language this morning that was agreed on that didn't make it in, but I think DEP or someone else involved, should talk to that.
Okay. Representative Tucker, did you have a comment? Your hand's up.
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay. Carrie Malinowski, can you remind us again what parts of 960 you felt like were missing that we wanted to include?
Sure. Just this morning, we were talking about just specifying in the section failure to provide notice that we used the original language in 960, which includes the department shall exempt a product from this prohibition if in the department's judgment, the lack of availability of the final product could pose an unreasonable risk to public health, safety, or welfare.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm just trying to follow on. I've got 960 open. I'm trying to find the specific reference.
Section 6, failure to provide notice.
All right, now I've got it messed up.
So in 1503, that's section 7.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like the way section 7's written currently that we cover that?
So the way that section 7 is currently written would mean that the department would have to wait for rulemaking to determine what the currently unavoidable use is. And this allows the department some flexibility if we use 960's language.
Yes, Dan.
So I think I understand what the intent is. So in the amendment, in subsection 7, most of the text is struck through, and then the language remains at the end. The last sentence, it reads, "The department may exempt a product from this prohibition if in the department's judgment the use of PFAS in the product is a currently unavoidable use." And I understand the department would prefer to use for that sentence from 960, "The department shall exempt a product from the prohibition if in the department's judgment the lack of availability of the product could pose an unreasonable risk to public health, safety, or welfare," instead of referring to an unavoidable use.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's right.
That's helpful.
Yes, okay.
Thanks for the clarification. Are there any thoughts about that from the committee? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor with a second. Are there any additional comments? I think we're ready. Yes, Dan.
So, sorry, are we assuming there was agreement already on that language change, or is that part of the motion too?
Representative Tucker?
No one said to change anything on that. We brought up the issue and nobody expressed a preference one way or the other, so we're going to just leave it.
Yep. Okay, I think we're ready for a vote.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Bennett.
just to be clear, we've got the amendment before us that was presented by the sponsor, LD 1503, dated yesterday, with the shall changing out, or the may changing out to a shall, with the stakeholder language included, and with an emergency enactor attached.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, Sabrina, we're ready for you.
Okay. Senator Brenner,
Yes.
Representative Tucker,
Yes.
Senator Bennett,
Yes.
Representative Hanley,
Yes.
Senator Carney, absent. Representative Bell,
Yes.
Representative Bloom, absent. Representative Dudera,
Yes.
Representative Gramlich,
Yes.
Representative Johansson,
Yes.
Representative O'Connor,
Yes.
Representative Toole, absent. Representative Ziegler,
Yes.
10 yes, 3 absent.
Okay, that was great. Now we will move on. Yes, Dan.
So just to be clear on process, if everyone's okay with it, I would like to bring this back before I start any formal processing, after an internal review in my office, where I have a chance to maybe make some technical edits to the language as necessary, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you for that. Okay, so that closes our work session on 1503, and we will now open a work session on 1505. And I will pass it over to you, Dan.
So I just sent you a analysis, as well as another proposed amendment from the sponsor. LD 1505 is an act to restrict the use of PFAS in firefighting foam. The bill prohibits, beginning January 1st, 2022, the discharge of firefighting or fire suppressing foam to which PFAS have been added when used for testing or training, except when the foam is entirely collected for proper disposal. The bill also prohibits, beginning January 1st, 2022, the manufacture, sale, and distribution of such foam unless federal law requires the inclusion of PFAS in the foam. The federal law is changed to allow an alternative to firefighting or fire suppressing foam to which PFAS have been added, then the foam may not be manufactured, sold, or distributed. A person that discharges or causes to be discharged into the coastal or inland waters of the state, firefighting or fire suppressing foam to which PFAS have been added, must notify the DEP as soon as practicable, but no more than 24 hours after the discharge. By January 1st, 2022, manufacturers of firefighting or fire suppressing foam to which PFAS have been added must notify their customers of these requirements and recall the foam and reimburse the retailer or other purchaser for the foam. The DEP is directed to collaborate with the Maine Emergency Management Agency and interested parties to develop a framework for the collection and safe storage of firefighting and fire suppressing foam prohibited by the legislation, and not returned to the manufacturer until the foam can be safely disposed of, and submit a report, including the framework, to this committee by March 31st, 2022. I've listed all the speakers for, against, and either for or against the bill. I'm going to skip a discussion of 960. The DEP noted that it is in support of Section 1 of the bill, which is the statutory changes, with one recommendation, which I'll get to in a second. It remained neither for nor against on the rest of the bill. The DEP recommended that all entities that possess Class B AFFF, the PFAS firefighting foam, to report semi-annually beginning July 1st, 2021 to the State Fire Marshal to assist in determining the cost associated with any take-back, disposal, and replacement program. The DEP noted that sections 2 and 3 of the bill, which outline notification, recall, and reimbursement requirements for manufacturers of these foams, raise serious questions regarding enforceability and liability that could result in litigation. DEP notes that section 4 of the bill, which requires development of a framework for the collection, safe storage, and ultimate disposal of these foams, describes a program that would require substantial funding, initial estimates of $215,000 for disposal and $1.85 million for purchase of replacement foam. There was testimony from the Alliance for Telomere Chemistry Stewardship, suggesting allowing the manufacture and sale of these foams to continue until efficient alternatives are approved, so that it's available for firefighting purposes as the best available tool for extinguishing Class B fires. There was testimony from the International Liquid Terminal Association, which suggested exempting from the prohibition the use of these foams at liquid fuel terminals. The testimony appeared to describe what would be an exemption from the sales prohibition, as the discharge prohibition in the bill does not prohibit the use of these foams in firefighting situations. There was some very recently received testimony from a group called the Firefighting Foam Coalition that suggested the committee consider a longer sales phase-out period. They suggested 5 years, allowing exemptions to the sales prohibition for sectors where there's no, what they call a drop-in replacement available, such as refineries, chemical factories, bulk fuel loading terminals, and some fixed fire suppression systems. And to clarify that the recall provision applies only to products sold after the effective date of the sales prohibition, after 1/1/2022. There was a proposal from the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy suggesting that the prohibition on the sale of the foam should be extended to include containers to which such foams are packaged for sale or transport if those containers have been fluorinated or otherwise contain PFAS. I do have a number of technical notes here. The committee may want to consider whether there's value to incorporating any of the definitions in 960 into LD 1505. There were definitions in 960 with respect to the firefighting foam provisions in that bill for aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF, for discharge and for person. There are no definitions used in LD 1505. Sections 2 and 3 of the bill are unallocated language, meaning that they're not to be put in statute. However, given their scope and relationship to the allocated law in section 1, the committee may want to consider whether or not to allocate those provisions to this new law, in other words, to put them in statute. I've noted here consideration of whether there's need for DEP to adopt rules on the new law. There's no explicit rulemaking authority provided in 1505. I think it would be assumed that DEP would be charged with enforcing and administering the new law, although that's not explicit, but it is in Title 38, which DEP has jurisdiction over. I've noted here there are numerous smaller technical issues with the bill. If the committee wishes to support the bill with or without substantive amendments, I can incorporate changes to the bill to address those technical issues. I had initially put the description of those technical issues in my analysis, but I added another page. I guess my statement would be the bill is not well written. There are a lot of traps, I guess, where an argument could be made that the language does something that I doubt the sponsors had intended. So I think if the committee is comfortable with the substance of what they're recommending, there's a number of language changes that could be made to address a number of those issues that I identified. But I didn't want to spend a long time going into that right now. I'm happy to answer any questions about the original bill or the analysis.
Any questions for Dan from the committee? Yes, Representative Tucker. You're muted, Representative.
Yes, I agree with the Opler analyst, Mr. Tartikoff. I would rather see a technical redraft, not to change the substance, but to change the technical language to incorporate these things and consider definitions and rulemaking authority. I think we should have a robust discussion of this right now, but I would feel uncomfortable voting for language on it if it's all in the air. You know, I don't know if the committee disagrees. If the committee wants to just vote on a concept, fine. But I would prefer to see it reworked in a more enforceable way. It's also it's aimed at the firefighting foam. This bill is much narrower than the earlier one that we just passed, and it's also narrower than the one that's coming up, 1600. So I don't think it's as highly urgent. I don't feel the sense of urgency that I do with the other two bills. Those are just some thoughts I had. And I just wonder what the rest of the committee thinks.
I would tend to agree with you, Representative Tucker. And I get the sense that the spirit of the committee is that we want to move this bill forward, but perhaps a week or so for Mr. Tartikoff to clean things up would be welcome. Senator Bennett.
Thank you. I subscribe thoroughly to the views of our two chairs. And I know that Mr. Tartikoff has not had a very good chance to look at the proposed amendment. I just to say where I kind of am generally on this is that I want to make sure that our firefighters have the ability to put out fires in the areas particularly that are susceptible to flame suppressant by PFAS containing stuff, as long as there aren't any suitable replacements for that. And I know there's some coming down the pike, but I don't think we really know when those are going to be used, particularly in aviation context and all that. So I'd like to make sure in whatever language we create that we have some waiver or something that would put off in those applications the prohibition of using fast-containing firefighting foam until there is suitable replacements. And also, I mean, the amendment is a bit different from the bill, and I'd really like to be able to kind of juggle all that too. But I certainly would like to see this bill passed, and so I'd work toward that end. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Any questions? Yes, Lori or Representative Gramlich.
Hey, I do answer to Lori. Thank you, Senator. Just to be clear, I agree with both you and Representative Tucker and Senator Bennett in terms of Dan's analysis and tightening up the language, and I wholeheartedly agree and support that. I just wanted to flag for the committee's information the amendment that was hammered out yesterday and somewhat early this morning, but mostly yesterday with the department and other advocates, had to do with addressing concerns for folks in the oil tank world to have the ability to put out fires and have an alternative resource available. So I just wanted to flag that for folks. That's really what the amendment addresses. However, I am completely comfortable with giving Mr. Tartikoff an opportunity to really tighten this language up so that we have a product that we are sure meets the intent of getting rid of PFAS in these products and is realistic and enforceable.
Thank you, Representative. Any additional comments or questions? I'll make a motion to, Representative Tucker.
I move we table.
I'll second it.
Third.
Show of hands. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Representative Gramlich. So that closes the work session on 15:05, and we'll put it in your able hands, Dan. And with that, we'll open up a work session on 1600.
It's coming there in a second. There we go. So here's another one where there is a proposed amendment and an analysis from me. LD 1600 is an act to investigate PFAS contamination of land and groundwater. The bill creates the Land Application Contaminant Monitoring Fund to be used by DEP to test and monitor soil and groundwater for PFAS and other contaminants and for other related activities. The fund is funded by a $10 per ton fee assessed on any disposal of septage, industrial sludge, municipal sludge, bioash, wood ash, or other residual, which is material generated as a byproduct of a non-agricultural production or treatment process that has value as a source of crop nutrients or soil amendment. The bill also requires the DEP to test land that has received residuals for PFAS and other contaminants and to notify the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry of the findings of any contamination of land currently being used for the production of agricultural products. Again, entities testifying for, against, neither for, against the bill were listed in the analysis. The sponsor distributed at the hearing a proposed amendment to the bill. I understand the amendment that's distributed today is intended to replace that amendment and includes additional changes. The DEP in its testimony made some recommendations, recommending that the focus should be on the testing of sludge and septage as residuals most likely to be of concern rather than the other residuals listed in the original bill. They asked for a clarification of whether the intent is to compel investigation of sites where residuals were received through DEP's right of inspection and entry under Section 347C in Title 38 in the event a site is no longer licensed or is under private ownership. They recommended amending the bill to allow for site prioritization based on a system to be developed by DEP. That's a development that is currently in process. The bill proposed a different prioritization process. The DEP proposed adjusting the testing completion date in the last section of the bill to reflect a prioritized investigation approach, personnel and contracting limitations, and the time constraints involved. In other words, to push out that testing completion date slightly. They recommended adjusting the fee in the bill to focus on the handling rather than the disposal of waste and account for differences in reporting metrics, noting that the tonnage or cubic yards is used to describe one type of residual, whereas others are described in gallons typically. And the DEP also asked whether there was a need to clarify when the fee is to begin to be assessed. The MDIA, which is the Maine Dairy Industry Association, proposed providing for a greater role for the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry in the testing program, clarifying the intended scope of the term residual as used in the testing program language, and clarify the intended meaning of the term other contaminants as provided in the scope of the fund and the testing program. They expressed a concern over the applicability to other regulated substances that are allowed for agricultural use that could be considered a contaminant. The Maine Rural Water Association and the Maine Water Environment Association both noted that the primary funding source of this program would be the sludge and septage disposal fee. Both of those entities assume that these fees will be primarily paid by utility ratepayers, in other words, by Maine residents who will see tax increases as a result. Although the entities noted that they do not object to a testing program for PFAS contamination, they suggested that the fund should be capitalized by federal and/or state funding, and if possible, by the manufacturers of these chemicals. The DEP similarly assumed in his testimony that these fee amounts, which they estimated to be around $3.6 million annually, would be passed on to utility ratepayers in the case of sludge and to homeowners and commercial businesses in the case of septage. There were additional concerns provided by the Maine Water Environment Association, suggesting that the term disposal in the fee provision is not clearly defined, but they assumed it would include all forms of biosolids and sludge management, including beneficial reuse. They argued that the $10 per ton fee is excessive and that it's twice as much as the current $5 per ton sludge surcharge under section 2203-A1 in Title 38. They noted that the provision in the bill allowing the transfer of unspent monies to the Uncontrolled Sites Fund could lead to a situation where fees paid by water utilities are used to remediate sites contaminated by substances other than PFAS, for which water utilities are not responsible parties, as the Uncontrolled Sites Fund law is broader than just PFAS. They argued the transfer provision was unnecessary, but if it was to be kept in, they suggested including spending restrictions in the Uncontrolled Sites Fund that are limited to PFAS contaminated sites. I have a note here, a couple notes about the fee provision. In the bill, the $10 per ton fee is to be imposed on quote unquote any disposal of these residuals. We're in the waste management laws in Title 38, so the definition section in 1303-C applies, and disposal is defined under 1303-C to mean the discharge, deposit, dumping, spilling, leaking, or placing of hazardous biomedical or solid waste, waste oil, refuse-derived fuel, sludge, or septage into or on land, air, and water, and then it describes incineration as well. I've noted here it's unclear which entities this fee is to be imposed on or at what facilities or locations, whether or not they're licensed, the fee is to be collected at. For reference, those waste handling fees in 2203A are imposed on solid waste disposed of at commercial, municipal, state-owned, and regional association landfills. So those fees are collected by a landfill from an entity disposing of waste and then remitted to DEP. I didn't have a chance to go through the amendment in any great depth, but I do note that it changes the fee provision activity that's being regulated from disposal of those residuals to handling. Handling is another defined term in the waste management laws, and it means to store, transfer, collect, separate, salvage, process, recycle, reduce, recover, incinerate, dispose of, or treat. So that category of activity is even broader than the term disposal, which it actually includes, and begs the same question about which entities are subject to the fee and where the fee is to be collected or imposed. We don't have any information yet from OFPR on fiscal costs, but as I mentioned previously, the DEP noted it would estimate annual fee revenue from the proposed fee in the vicinity of $3.6 million. And DEP also recognized that its current resources would not be adequate to implement a program of this magnitude. It was also noted by DEP that the governor will be proposing significant funding for this work in the budget change package, which I understand is to be released fairly soon. I'm happy to answer any questions about that analysis or the original bill.
Thank you, Dan. I would love if Mr. Burns could speak a little bit to the amendment and also particularly to that distinction between the word disposal versus the word handling, or if there's a third word we haven't quite yet considered.
Yes. Good morning, Senator Benner, Representative Tucker, members of the committee. I can try to speak to some of this. Hang on, let me call up the amendment so I have it in front of me. So I want to start off by saying that the DEP absolutely supports the need to test and understand what is going on out there. So from that perspective, we've been trying to work with the sponsor and members of Defend Our Health to try to make this workable for everybody. So that is our goal. So despite what language may be here, keep in mind that is the goal. In the amendment, what we were trying to address is that septage and sludge are the two residuals that we believe would be most likely to be of concern with PFAS. The original bill had broader language that would have brought in wood ash and things that we don't believe would have the same level of concern. So that was the starting point for this bill, is to try to move it to the items that we anticipate would be of concern. The testing locations, I'm going to skip over the fee piece right now. The testing locations, again, we made that consistent with testing for septage and sludge locations. As you heard in the department's testimony, we estimate there's somewhere around 700 of those sites that have been licensed and permitted to receive this material. Some of those sites that have received material we had concerns about with regards to right of access. Some of those sites, the licenses may have been surrendered in the past, the property may have been sold off, it could be under private ownership. So we were concerned about what happens when we go to a site like that and a homeowner is unwilling to have us come onto their property to do the testing. The bill as originally proposed would have compelled us to do that. So now we've agreed on a compromise that would still look at us to test those sites as long as the homeowner in that example was willing to have us come on to the property. So we're trying to address those sites, but recognize that not all homeowners may be willing if this license has been surrendered. We also worked on developing language around setting priority criteria for what sites we would evaluate, knowing that there are 700 of them out there. We can't approach this in a shotgun approach, so we spent time and are still in the process of finalizing a prioritization system where we would look at things such as the volume of material land applied on any given site, the acreage involved, the years of land application, what industries were in town at the time when that land application was occurring. So there certainly are some industries that would have been more likely to have included significant contributions of PFAS. So we've accounted for that. With regards to the resource questions that were raised last time, we worked with the sponsor to push the dates out a little bit and felt like these are dates that that we now should be able to meet okay. So there's 2024 for half of the sites and 2025 for the other half of the sites. So we believe that given the resources that we expect in the budget change package, that these are now doable dates for us. We also are still discussing, as of this morning, language, and this is something that Mr. Tartikoff, I'm sure, can help us out with. Near the end of section 3 in the amendment, we were discussing facilities that are currently proposing to surrender their license. We have a handful of those that are in the wings right now that we're not acting on. That would apply to our sludge land application sites. And then we also have our septage land application sites that have 5-year license terms or shorter as determined by the department. We've been issuing 2-year licenses since the PFAS issue became of significance for us. So the concern there is that if a septage land application facility is licensed, they could simply let their license expire and not have to do any testing. So the end of the amendment of Section 3 is trying to capture that piece. So I think that still needs some work and needs some statutory references put in that are not in the amendment yet. With regards to the question of handling versus disposal, we were looking at this in terms of disposal being more directed towards landfill situations and wanting to make sure that it was clear that this was broader to incorporate all of our land application programs. So that was the attempt in what we were doing with changing from disposal to handling. Now, there also are facilities that that store and process some of these materials. That would be a handling function. So that was the reason for making that change in the language. As to who it applies to, I think that is a question that's worth some discussion. Would that be the person who first handles it, the person who has the licensed facility where it's applied? I think, again, we should talk about that some more as to where we want to apply that fee.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Burns. That's all quite helpful. Yes, Senator Bennett.
Thank you. I was just looking at the amendment, and I understand the focus here is on PFAS, but there is this language in the amendment which says under section 2, number 2, perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances and other contaminants. Wondering what your interpretation is, Mr. Burns, about including other contaminants in there and whether it kind of diffuses the potentiality for the use of this fund.
That's a very good question.
Well, it was raised by the dairy folks, and I get their point. It's what else might be contained here? So.
I would view the focus of this certainly on the PFAS components. Other contaminants could be other emerging contaminants that unfold as this investigation continues. So I'm not opposed to having the language of other contaminants in there. I think it is helpful because it doesn't focus us only on the PFAS components if we discover a different contaminant as we're investigating these sites.
On the flip side, if I may, Madam Chair, there are contaminants, as we all know, in the ground, and water, and soil. And I'm a little concerned. While I certainly trust the department to focus on PFAS, I'm concerned that that other things might may distract from the purpose at hand. So I'd be interested in seeing maybe a little bit more clarity around what other contaminants might be in this context, and putting a little bit of bracketing around it, if not just taking out the language entirely. Thank you.
Representative Gramlich.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Senator Bennett. I appreciate that. We talked about this a bit yesterday, and perhaps one of the ways to kind of give a little bit more specificity is to identify what we might anticipate, and then have a clause or a section that says including but not limited to, in the event that when we do our testing and evaluation, in the event that another harmful toxic chemical is discovered, that it's not lost in the mix, if that would help to kind of make you more comfortable with that section of it.
I feel very comfortable leaving that line in. I think that the DEP is going to be pretty preoccupied with PFAS, and if we were to find something else along the way, it would be nice to know about it. So I'm of the, I like the spirit of the language, and I would prefer to leave it in there. Any additional discussion? Any questions for Mr. Burns? Yes, Senator Bennett.
Just one other thing also raised by the dairy folks in Dan's and Mr. Tartikoff's analysis was the question about involvement of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. And I just wondered if Mr. Burns could speak to the working relationship on these issues with respect to that department, since they have such a sobering responsibility to deal with that important part of Maine's constituency.
Absolutely, I can speak to that because that is an ongoing working relationship that is developed very tight between the DEP, DACF, and the Maine CDC. So we all work hand in hand on these sites right now. So as you probably are aware, DACF has an ongoing retail milk testing program. If they identify any anomalies in the milk results, they notify us. We work together to figure out what the source is and evaluate where things came from and what needs to be done to both help the farmers try to maintain their operations as well as to protect nearby citizens who may be on private wells. So that is a very strong relationship. We talk several times a week with the agency. I should have also mentioned that in terms of our prioritization system, that there would be communications with ag with regards to what fields have been utilized for various crops to the extent that land application has occurred there. So again, that's just a very tight working relationship, and that's one that we recognize is critical to this program.
Thank you.
I also, if you would indulge me, if I could go back to the previous question, just a little bit more to talk about this other contaminants. So to my way of thinking, the other contaminants would be where we were investigating PFAS already. So they would be co-located other contaminants. So this would not be going out to a site to identify a contaminant that's not PFAS by itself.
Okay, thanks so much. It gives me a lot of comfort.
Representative Tucker.
I move that I move that LD 1600 ought to pass as amended by the language we have in front of us that was submitted earlier this morning, subject, of course, as usual, to the technical changes which don't affect the substance by our OPLA analyst.
I'll second that.
Second.
All right, Senator Bennett's a second. Any further discussion? All right, I think we're ready for a vote, Sabrina. Yes, Dan.
Sorry, just to be clear, it was noted that there was a lack of clarity about the fee provision. That's not something I'm able to fix as a technical edit. If you would like to move forward with the language as is, I can make any tweaks necessary, but to me, that seems somewhat substantive. So I want to make sure there wasn't an expectation I was going to fix that.
No, I don't think you're very good at not touching anything substantive, and I appreciate that discipline. I'm moving that it be passed as written now. I also will be glad, I'll be the first one to make a motion to reconsider if upon reflection, any senator or representative on this committee has developed some serious concerns, and we would have another vote.
All right, I believe we're ready, Sabrina.
Okay. Senator Brenner,
Yes.
Representative Tucker,
Yes.
Senator Bennett,
Yes.
Representative Hanley,
Yes.
Senator Carney, absent. Representative Bell,
Yes.
Representative Bloom, absent. Representative Dudera,
Yes.
Representative Gramlich,
Yes.
Representative Johansson,
Yes.
Representative O'Connor,
Yes.
Representative Toole, absent. Representative Ziegler,
Yes.
10 yes, 3 absent.
All right, thank you, everyone. Dan, any last minute thoughts about 1600 before we close that work session? Okay, great. Thank you, Representative Gramlich, for your hard work. And thank you to all the stakeholders and the DEP for hanging in there with us this morning. Appreciate it. At this point, I'm gonna have us take a break for lunch. It's 12:15, 12:13 exactly. So let's take a break till about 12:45. It's a half an hour to eat, and we'll come back and finish up. We have 3 more work sessions and some language review after this. Yes, Representative Gramlich.
Just for the committee and for attendees, I have a meeting that I cannot change this afternoon, so I'll be coming back to ENR once I conclude my other meeting.
We
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing you. All right, everybody. See you at 12:45. Thank you.
to Portland.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Deirdre. Good to see you. Senator
You as
Flynn,
well.
Senator Bell, Representative Ziegler. Any other colleagues present? Do you want to turn back on your cameras? Hello, Representative O'Connor. Okay, 2, 3. Can probably go ahead and get started. We are going to take up LD 676 next. And this is the reclassification of the Androscoggin River bill.
Go ahead.
All you.
All right. Sounds good. And my screen just disappeared. Hold on one second. Okay. This bill reclassifies from Class C to Class B the lower section of the Androscoggin River from Gulf Island Dam to a line formed by the extension of the Bath Brunswick boundary across Merry Meeting Bay in a northwesterly direction. There were quite a few proponents and opponents to this bill that spoke at the public hearing. That list of those folks are listed on the bill analysis I just sent along to the committee. As a quick summary of law regarding water classification and standards, there are 4 standards for the classification of freshwater rivers. Those are class AA, A, B, and C. In the higher classes, class AA and A, the law places more restrictions on human activities that might pose a risk of degradation of water quality, and more allowances for human activities are allowed in class B and class C. The classification system establishes the designated uses and the related characteristics of those uses for each class of water, and also establishes water quality criteria necessary to protect those uses and related characteristics. Designated uses are those uses specified in water quality standards for each water body or segment, whether or not they are being attained. I've included a table in my analysis. I'm not going to go over it, but it's something I adapted from DEP's testimony and also their triennial review of water quality standards. And it's also the language from Title 38, Section 465. And it just talks about the designated uses in Class B and Class C, the dissolved oxygen numeric criteria, bacteria numeric criteria, habitat, narrative criteria, aquatic life. Additionally, federal regulations require states to adopt a statewide anti-degradation policy. Maine's anti-degradation policy is governed by 38 MRSA section 464 subsection 4 paragraph F. And I've attached this to the bill analysis too, so you have all the language. And in general, the state's anti-degradation policy provides for the following: existing in-stream water uses and the level of water quality necessary to protect those existing uses must be maintained and protected. Existing in-stream water uses are defined as those which have actually occurred on or after November 28, 1975, in or on a water body, and whether or not the uses are included in the standard for classification of the particular water body. Determinations of what constitutes an existing in-stream water use on a particular water body must be made on a case-by-case basis by the department. When the actual water quality exceeds the minimum standards of the next highest classification, that higher water quality must be maintained and protected. Some notes, issues, and possible amendments from testimony. Brian Kavanaugh from the DEP noted in his testimony that the department is currently evaluating the same proposal via the triennial review process, which is a public process including a comment period and public hearing, whereby changes in water quality standards are evaluated by the DEP and the Board of Environmental Protection. The BEP may or may not recommend to the legislature in the second session a reclassification of the lower Androscoggin to Class B. Those in support of the bill state that the sampling on the lower Androscoggin has shown the segment meets Class B standards nearly all of the time. They also contend that the law has placed a non-discretionary duty upon the BEP to act to recommend an upgrade because 38 MRSA section 464 subparagraph F states that when the actual quality of any classified water exceeds the minimum standards of the next highest classification, that higher water quality must be maintained and protected, and the board shall recommend to the legislature that the water be reclassified to the next highest classification. Those opposed to the bill, including the DEP, state that under certain conditions and in certain locations, the lower Androscoggin River meets the criteria for Class B water, but the DEP contends that that section of law does not require the BEP recommend to the legislature that water be reclassified to the next highest classification solely based on monitoring data that is not representative of critical conditions. The DEP's interpretation of that section is that it must generally be read in the full context of the water quality laws, including the section of law that establishes the conditions under which a discharge may be licensed. There were a lot of other comments and critiques in the testimony. I didn't summarize everything. Some other points that were made, though, is sort of this reclassification change can result in regulatory uncertainty, whether those licensed would automatically be out of compliance if switched to Class B. And from DEP's perspective, modeling shows even without current licenses in effect that they couldn't maintain the Class B classification. Furthermore, there were some amendments suggested in testimony on this bill. Quite a few people, including some of the sponsors and co-sponsors, suggesting carrying it over to the second session to allow DEP to reissue discharge permits that expired in 2020 for Lewiston, Auburn, Lisbon, and Brunswick wastewater plants at the current Class C certification, and also to direct the DEP by letter to renew expired permits by September 30th, 2021. Steve Zaretti of Brookfield said, while opposed to the bill, if the legislature moves forward with the proposal, he suggests that facilities currently operating or under development be offered legacy treatment and require future development meet Class B discharge and water quality requirements. And Matt Marks from AGC Maine said an economic study should be conducted for consideration before adopting a change to a rivers classification. At this time, there is currently no fiscal impact determined, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. That was great. Representative Johansson.
Thank you very much for that. In the last session, this committee heard where they reclassified a lot of the rivers and streams in Penobscot, northern Penobscot, and Aroostook County. For those, the department had to go through a series of public hearings and some other steps they had to take before they brought that to the legislature. Has that been done in this case?
Currently, there is a process going on in conjunction with the Board of Environmental Protection, part of their triennial plan, and they are looking at water classifications, and this is one of the rivers that they are considering, and I believe they will be having public hearings. I don't know if they've had them yet or they are proposing to have public hearings, and there has been a report issued that talks about the different segments that are under consideration.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to mention so that it's out there in the room that my intention is that we carry this over. I would like to give the DEP the opportunity to finish its triennial review. And I've spoken with the sponsor, and he's committed to going down the river and getting everyone on board, if you will. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. And encouraging those conversations to happen. So my intention is that we carry this over. I'm just going to put that out in the room for conversation. Representative Tucker? You're muted, Representative.
I move that we carry this bill over. I don't mean to cut off discussion. We should keep talking, perhaps. Not only is the 3-year review ongoing and on its way, there's also the relicensing issues, which might change slightly people's position. And but I'd like to add a third, more of a public relations reason. We've been focusing on, because this bill would aim at the lower Androscoggin, below, just above Lewiston down. And I heard some testimony from the town manager in Rumford and for others that the people in the upper part of the river, the upper Androscoggin, are somewhat nervous and have felt excluded from the discussion. Mm-hmm. And I think now that we've had this hearing and having seen what happened on the Penobscot, I see finally the different organizations along the river, whether they be environmental groups, towns, waste treatment plants, businesses, paper mills. I see those groups have a chance to come together and share with each other what are the benefits and the costs of improving the river. And I think the extra time would be beneficially used so that the town manager of Rumford doesn't feel like he's been ignored. So he has a chance to make his input, and other organizations like that. So for those good reasons, as stated by our Senate chair, I think it'd be a great idea to push this on, not to kill the bill, but to carry it over. And we can pick it up next year and see what happens. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Representative Dudera?
Thank you. Yes, I was going to second too. I totally agree with what Representative Tucker is saying and what Senator Brenner has said. I mean, if we're going to get more information from the DEP, we ought to wait and make our decision when we have a little bit more information. And I do appreciate the idea of bringing the other towns on board, because it's important, and and maybe we can end up doing a little bit more even than what we're intending right now. So I think that's a great idea to carry over. Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thanks so much. I second that motion because I think this bill is far too premature. I mean, it was listed early on as being an aspirational bill. There's nothing aspirational about improving the water qualities where it costs loads of money to local people. The Androscoggin River, as it is with several of the other members here, like Representative Tucker, is really critical to my neck of the woods. And all I can say is, thank God we made the progress we've made on cleaning up this river to date. I mean, it is like, when I was a child, it was just unbelievably poisonous. So we've done a lot, but I don't think we should rush things. We've got a good process in place to review this, and we ought to let the process work and just not like jump the gun legislatively. So I feel like this has already happened. The bill is before us, so we have to deal with it. And for that reason, I move to, I support the motion to carry it over, even though I think it was a bit mishandled. Thank you.
Representative Hanley?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I don't really support the idea of carrying it over. We only have 7 slots to do that. This bill kind of presupposes that that river isn't constantly being evaluated by the department and all the people that live up and down it. And their testimony against this bill really carries some weight with me. I don't disagree with looking into this, but it's this, in a way, this bill declares that they're not looking into it. And they certainly are. And now with this bill in front of them and all the noise that's been made, I'm sure they're going to continue looking. But we don't want to circumvent a process that already exists to classify rivers the way we classify them. So I wouldn't support the bill, but I will support the carryover reluctantly.
I'll take your reluctant support. Thank you, Representative Hanley. Any more conversation, or are we ready for a vote? Okay, Sabrina, I think we're ready to go.
Senator Brenner.
Yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hanley.
Yes.
Senator Carney, absent. Representative Bell.
Yes.
Representative Bloom, absent. Representative Dudera.
Yes.
Representative Gramlich, absent. Representative Johansson,
Yes.
Representative O'Connor,
Reluctantly, yes.
Representative Toole.
Yes. Oh, never mind.
Representative Ziegler.
Yes.
9 yes, 4 absent.
And we'll go next to hear from Todd Grissett.
All right.
Members of the committee, nice to see you again. My name is Tom.
Okay. We're just going to mute Representative Ziegler. Okay. That ends our work session on LD 676. Yes, Representative Tucker. You're muted, Representative.
I just have a question for our analyst, and that is, does our vote mean that we now compile a letter which explains our reasons for the carryover and request agreement from the presiding officers? Is that right?
Yeah, usually they'll have you do it at the end when you have all your carryover settled. So we would put it all in one letter with all the bills that you're wishing to carry over. And then with each of those bills, the reasons why you're carrying those over.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we end the work session on LD 676, and we will open up a work session on LD 1488, which is Representative Bell's resolve for a dam study.
So this resolve requires the Department of Defense, Veterans, and Emergency Management, in consultation with others, to conduct a study of the state's dams and the state's dam safety efforts, including a review of the state's laws and rules governing dams and dam safety, and whether they are sufficient to ensure the objectives of laws governing dam safety are met. A survey of the state's existing dams, including the total number of registered and unregistered dams, an assessment of the hazard potential and classification of each dam, the current age and estimated operational lifespan of each dam, the potential risk of dam failure to downstream communities, and the impacts of dams and potential dam failures on public resources. An assessment of the resiliency of the state's existing dams and their ability to withstand historic and projected drought and flood events, a review of the existing limits and needs of the state's dam safety efforts, and a review of local, state, and federal or loan or grant programs available to dam owners. The department is required to have the Association of Dam Safety Officials conduct a peer review of the dam's safety efforts by December 1st, 2021. And the department is also required to submit a report on the results of its study, including suggested legislation and the peer review, to the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs by January 14th, 2022. And that committee is authorized to submit a bill based on the report. It also allows the department to use funds from federal or private sources, if available, to conduct the study, and is required to disclose those funding sources in its report to the VLA committee. At the hearing, there were quite a few proponents, there were no opponents, and Joe Legy, I'm probably pronouncing his name incorrectly, from the Maine Emergency Management Agency, testified neither for nor against. Just a couple notes, issues, and I don't think there were any amendments suggested in testimony, but in the 2020 report card on Maine's infrastructure, Maine's dams received a grade of D+. In the 2018 dam safety performance report for Maine, Maine was found to have 56% compliance with the Association of Dam Safety Official Model Dam Safety Program, which is below the national average of 79%. According to the Dam Safety Database, there are more than 1,000 dams in Maine. 565 are state regulated, 156 are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, 85 on or impacting the Salmon Falls River on the Maine-New Hampshire border, regulated by the New Hampshire DES Dam Bureau and the New Hampshire FERC, and 2 located on the Canadian border, regulated by the International Joint Commission. Of those regulated by the state, 32 are considered hazard potential and 72 are considered significant hazard potential. MEMA stated that the dam safety program is funded through the general fund and federal grant programs and employs 3 full-time staff, 2 inspectors and 1 administrator that are responsible for around 600 dams. They specified while the study could provide valuable information, they do not have the money or staff to complete the study. Subsequent to the public hearing, Caitlin Bernard from the Nature Conservancy provided additional information and also stated that the TNC is fully committed to supporting this study and that the organization has set aside funding in our annual budget to support costs related to the study, including potentially hiring a consultant or facilitator to help the main dam safety program complete the study. And also this morning, you received supplemental information from MEMA regarding questions asked at the work session. And they had stated in that information that they had reached out to one of their consultants and they estimated that this could potentially cost $1.5 million to $2 million to do. And that information was emailed to all of you this morning. At this time, no fiscal impact has been determined. And with that, I can take any questions.
Does the committee have any questions? Representative Bell, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. I just want to say that in respect to the budget for this resolve, this study, we had focused on doing a secondary source, if you will, review of what the existing program we have here in the state of Maine. And that would include a peer review and also looking at the existing structure we have in place in the state of Maine for inspecting dams. We were not planning to do any site visits, or certainly not going out to 1,000 dams and trying to assess their structure. So I think that the estimate that Mr. Legee gave us is was not in the intention that we had, and certainly well beyond the scope of the study that we were planning to do. We had worked with another point of contact, another stakeholder within his organization that had helped us draft the initial intention. So we do think we have funding to make this study complete, and through the auspices of TNC and also with the Association of of State Dam Inspectors across the country. So I don't think that we need to concern ourselves with the $2 million tag that Mr. Legee was looking at.
Any questions for Representative Bell? Yes, Representative Hanley.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, Representative Bill. Nice conversation with you yesterday. Appreciated that.
Yes, sir.
Who's the funding source you're talking about?
We have two sources. One is the Nature Conservancy right here in the state of Maine, and the other is the Association of Dam Inspectors, the Association of Dam Safety Officers, the ASDSO. And we worked with those, both of those folks in drafting this resolve.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. What percentage are they both equal partners in this, or did one commit more than the other?
We didn't get to that granularity of we haven't got a final price tag, nor do we have anyone saying how much they're going to cover of it.
Right. Thank you, Representative.
Yes, Deirdre.
Just a point of clarification. If the intention isn't to do site visits, does anyone, I don't know if I think the language may be what made them think site visits, because it says a survey of the state's existing dams, including the total number of registered and unregistered dams and hazard potentials and hazard classifications of each dam. So I'm wondering if that language was what led them to believe that there would have to be a visit to every single dam. And if that's not the intention, if going forward, did you want to clarify that potentially?
Yeah, we might need to amend the language just to clarify that we don't intend to do site visits. It's more collecting of secondary existing information on the dams.
Any other comments? Yes, Representative O'Connor.
Thank you, Senator. So wouldn't that have to be written so that it wasn't a state funding agency that, or the state wasn't going to fund that? So it would not go to the appropriations table. Am I correct?
It states currently in the resolve that the department can use funds from federal or private sources if to the extent they're available. So I think it's covered that they have the option to not have to use state funds for that. I mean, you can make it clear somehow that they couldn't use general funds or anything like that, but it does say currently in the resolve that they could accept private funds to do the study.
So I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with the acceptance of private funds on such an enormous project for, you know, the cost that this is going to be, because in the past, I've seen he who pays the piper usually names the tune. So I question the results of a study that comes from a privately funded organization.
Representative or Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was dealing with this very question in another committee with respect to a bill that I was putting forward. And the important thing, as far as I'm concerned, to address Representative O'Connor's very good concern, is that you know, the funds may be applied to a given purpose, but it still flows through the state. So it's not like they're directly contracting to for an outcome that might be expected. The state would still be the ones who do the work.
Representative Hanley.
Yes, as I think about the private funding sources, it's, you know, when you have a dentist look at your teeth, they always find cavities. So when you hire when you take money from firms that are committed to removals of dams, you're going to get reports that say you need to remove your dam. So I'm very suspect about the funding sources.
My understanding is that this isn't about removal, it's about safety. Would you be more supportive of the bill if the funding was from the state? Yes, Representative Hanley.
Actually, I don't support this legislation. I think that we're already taking care of the issue because dams aren't invisible. They're all over the place, and people that live near them and deal with them are constantly observing them. And there's a mechanism to investigate anything that looks like an issue. I mean, all around me, you know, there's dams everywhere, and nothing goes unnoticed.
Representative Tucker.
I move that LD 1488 ought to pass, along with the clarification that it does not require a revisitation of all the dams for $2 million. That it just be amended as analyst Schneider has suggested to eliminate any confusion about that.
I second that.
Second.
I think Representative Dudera beat you to it, Representative Ziegler.
She's younger and faster.
Representative Bell has a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the fact that we have a D+ grade, it tells me that we do have cavities, and that we are. I think it's time for us to take a look at how we manage our dam inventory, and I think it's time that this study would be focusing not necessarily on each individual of the 1,000 dams in our state, but more on how we do the process, and that's the nature of our study.
Thank you, Representative Bell. I like to think of dams as additional infrastructure like bridges, and I feel like they deserve the same kind of attention. And I'm grateful to the Nature Conservancy for their support with the issue. Yes, Senator Bennett.
Before we vote, could I hear Representative Bell once again recount the acronym for that dam group? I'm joking. It's never mind. It's fine. Thank you.
Some damn organization.
All right, should we take the dam vote? Senator Bennett, did you have another comment?
Not at this time. Thank you.
I think we're ready.
I can't hear her at all.
I don't think she started. Sabrina, we're ready whenever you are. Maybe a technical difficulty. We'll be patient. I don't know if I'll ever get to refer to one of our votes quite like that again, will I?
Did Sabrina hear us?
She can. I think she's having trouble getting her audio to work.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
For some reason, my mic is just stopped working. So, all right. 1488. It's all right. Senator Brenner.
Yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Representative Hanley.
No.
Senator Carney. Absent. Representative Bell.
Yes.
Representative Bloom. Absent. Representative Dudera.
Yes.
Representative Gramlich. Absent. Representative Johansson.
No.
Representative O'Connor.
No.
Representative Toole. Absent. Representative Ziegler.
Yes.
6 yes, 3 no's, 4 absent. Is there a specific minority report?
Ought not to pass.
Okay, so that ends our work session on 1488, and we'll open a work session on 1498, which is the heating credits bill.
I'm having technical difficulties. 1 second. I can't get my screen to sit on the side, so I can't see what I need in front of me. Hold on 1 second. All right, there we go. So this bill makes the rules adopted by the Board of Environmental Protection, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Department of Transportation to ensure compliance with greenhouse gas emissions levels, major substantive rules. It prohibits the adoption by the Board of Environmental Protection, the Department of Environmental Protection, or the Department of Transportation, the adoption of a rule that increases the cost of heating fuel, natural gas, gasoline, or diesel fuel by issuing permits to limit the amount of these fuels sold in the state in order to limit greenhouse gas emissions. A rule that would increase the cost of heating fuel, natural gas, gasoline, or diesel fuel by imposing a tax or requiring a permitting fee to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that is based on the carbon emissions of these fuels. Increases the cost of heating fuel, natural gas, gasoline, or diesel fuel by imposing a tax or requiring a permitting fee to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on the carbon emissions of any carbon-based fuels as part of a rebate or dividend program, or causes the state to join a multi-state consortium or coalition that requires the state to implement any of those policies as a condition of membership. It also requires that a proposal to implement by legislation a policy limiting the sale of heating fuels, natural gas, gasoline, or diesel fuels to limit greenhouse gas emissions, or imposing a tax or permitting fees to reduce greenhouse gas emissions may not become law without the Senate and the House of Representatives approving legislation, both adopting the policy and joining a multi-state consortium or a coalition. And lastly, it requires that any carbon sequestration policy prioritize the offset of main generated emissions. At the hearing, again, you have heard from some proponents, quite a few opponents, and some neither for nor against. The DEP has posted a proposed routine technical rule related to the sections of law this bill is amending, as required by 38 MRSA section 576A subsection 4. The proposed rule will require the department to collect and aggregate greenhouse gas emissions data from all sources in the state. The data will be compiled and incorporated into the biennial report to the legislature on the state's greenhouse gas inventory, and a public hearing is scheduled for May 20th, 2021 regarding this proposed rule. Those in support expressed concern that DEP, BEP, and DOT could adopt rules under the rulemaking directive in section 576A subsection 4 that would result in regressive taxes and or fees that pass inequitable costs to Mainers, especially rural Mainers or those on fixed incomes. If this is the case, they then contend that these rules should be subject to greater scrutiny from the public and the legislature. Those in opposition contend, I wrote contend, excuse my error, that these changes would delay action on climate change at a time when the state is poised to begin to move forward on its comprehensive climate action plan, and that access to regional partnerships oftentimes can result in the reduced cost to achieve outcomes. The department stated in its testimony that legislative authorization is already necessary for the department to create any programs that involve collection and distribution of funds, and that any program that results in a proposal for new regulatory obligations is subject to the Maine Administrative Procedures Act and must go through public process. Therefore, these proposed changes are unnecessary, redundant to existing requirements, or both. Just as a note, under current law, each state agency must submit a regulatory agenda to the appropriate committee on a yearly basis. This document contains a list of the rules the agency expects to propose, the statutory basis for the rule, the purpose of the rule, the anticipated schedule for adopting the rule, a listing of potentially benefited and regulated parties for each rule, and a listing of all rules adopted on emergency basis since the last regulatory agenda was issued, and that the committee gets to review those every year. Furthermore, in Title V, it requires the Secretary of State by February 1st of each year to provide to the Executive Director of the Legislative Council a list of all rules adopted by each agency during the previous calendar year. And then after each committee has received a list of rulemaking activity, that committee could require an agency to appear before the committee and may report out legislation in the same legislative session in which the report is received to adjust rulemaking authority related to the rules adopted in the previous calendar year. So there is some authority existing for you to look back if rules are adopted and you were not happy that they were done that way, or routine technical, that you can review and report out a bill based on that rulemaking. Additionally, in testimony, an amendment was suggested from Sierra Club. They stated that they do not support this legislation as drafted, including making all regulation under the greenhouse gas emissions reductions laws major substantive and barring all regulation which would raise the cost of fuels, but would support making any regulation which raises the cost of fuels major substantive. Other than that, there were no other amendments suggested in the testimony, and fiscal impact has not yet been determined. So with that, I can take any questions if there are any.
Chair Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was really intrigued when I read your analysis, Ms. Schneider, about the idea to make that the last one you mentioned, the Sierra Club, that would making any regulation which raises the cost of fuels major and substantive. How would such a suggestion fit into this bill?
I would have to give that some thought on the framework of how that would fit in well. I mean, I think you would have to make a decision. Are you going, if you would probably repeal the provisions that bar those increases from occurring at all. So you would get rid of those pieces of the bill and have some language that if the rules adopted by the department pursuant to this subsection result in X, those rules would need to be major substantive or something like that. I think you would need to replace that whole section of prohibitions with something regarding major substantive. I mean, there is something in law now too. I don't know how that would apply here. And I think sometimes the legislature has some authority, but whenever new fees or things of that nature are adopted, those rules should be major substantive by law. And so that may be already covered to some extent if they are proposing new fees or new taxes, if that in itself would require a major substantive rulemaking. I'm unclear on that. I don't think it's a black and white answer.
I'm unclear on that as well. And I certainly think in this particular case, to get maximum public buy-in for any sort of costs that could be directly related to it, that it makes sense to have the legislature review such things. Thank you.
Representative Tucker.
I move that LD 1498 ought not to pass.
Is there a second? Representative Dudera. Did you want to speak to your motion, Representative?
I would only suggest that any implication from Senator Bennett's remarks that we can put lipstick on this bill would fail. I don't see how we can turn it into a revamping of the Administrative Procedure Act and just have enhanced, subtle enhanced gradations of the type of regulations that we approve or disapprove. I don't see getting into that tangle. I think this bill is aimed squarely at any efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I see it as hopeless to try to come out with some kind of lesser included language.
Thank you, Representative Tucker. Senator Bennett.
I appreciate Representative Tucker's point of view, and but I don't really appreciate the characterization of my question. It was an actual question that I'd really like an answer to before voting on this myself, but I understand the committee's interest in moving this forward. But I would just be shocked, frankly, if it wasn't considered major substantive under the Administrative Procedures Act, and would really like some clarity on that point. If it is in fact not, would not be considered as such. So I may just have to withhold my vote until that's cleared up. Thank you.
Any additional? Yes, Representative Dudera.
Thank you. And I appreciate this discussion. But to me, this is just a dangerous path down, undoing the good work we're trying to do with the Maine Climate Council and the work of hundreds of Mainers who have put in time. And I just see it as taking us down the wrong path when we're really trying to accomplish something. Thank you.
Representative Hanley.
Thank you, Senator. I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't help myself. It's in my nature, I think. This bill is about putting in statute, you're not going to raise the price of fuels on thousands and thousands of Mainers without legislative overview. And I see that's not lipstick. That's for real thing to do. And I will give this bill the benefit of the doubt and support it.
Representative O'Connor.
Thank you, Senator. I actually agree with with the premise of this bill and seeing the price of fuel rise already. And I just really think that this would be a good step forward to actually protect future increases on the people without their say. So I actually like this bill. That's all.
Any additional questions or comments? Representative Tucker.
I hate to disagree with my colleagues, but in the bill analysis, there was some discussion by proponents that somehow the legislature is not involved in all of these programs. I would say that if we legislators are worried about the costs of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and so forth and the use of carbon fuels, it's incumbent on them to do their homework, because both technical rule changes and substantive rule changes are constantly being revealed to the legislature, whether it's substantive or simply technical rulemaking. That information is all there. And there are plenty of chances to challenge or undo or revamp by the legislature of those rules. We are constantly being notified of rulemaking of both kinds. And I think that if you truly are an opponent of the various programs we've been discussing, you should do your homework and follow up on those things and do the research. There is plenty of opportunity to oppose these programs. And I think this bill would just be adding additional burdens that are unnecessary. Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. I don't look at this as like a substantive process, you know, for or against the program. In fact, I'm for a lot of these programs. I believe that carbon pollutants are a problem. I believe in that the planet is warming. I believe all of that. For me, it's a question of just simple process. Okay, just for clarity. Does the legislature get an overt say in rulemaking that is going to drive up the cost for our citizens? And our very talented OPLA analyst wasn't clear on this, and I'm not clear on it, having dealt with the Administrative Procedures Act, because as the chairman says, it's complicated stuff. There's some routine and technical rules, and some major and substantive. And so I just simply say, I'd like to get better understanding of that piece before I vote.
Any additional comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Yes, Representative Johansson.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. Could I hear that motion again?
The motion is ought not to pass.
Thank you.
Mhm. Sabrina, are you ready?
Yes. All right. Senator Brenner.
Yeah. Yes.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Senator Bennett. Absent. Representative Hanley.
No.
Senator Carney. Absent. Representative Bell.
Yes.
Representative Bloom, absent. Representative Dudera,
Yes.
Representative Gramlich, absent. Representative Johansson,
No.
Representative O'Connor, you are
You're
muted.
muted.
No.
Representative Toole, absent. Representative Ziegler,
Yes.
5 yes, 3 no's, and 5 absent. Is there a minority report?
Ought to pass.
Okay. Representative Johansson, did you have a comment? What's your
Muted.
I did, but then she took off. What did she say about the number of no's?
There were 3 no's.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. And with that, I believe we have completed our work sessions for the day. We have still ahead of us a little bit of language review.
Mostly fiscal. I'm going to send them all in one document because I think it's just going to be easier to track. So the first one up, and for this, let me just get this expanded because I'm going to share my screen. I think on this one it's easier. That always takes me a second. So the first one up is LD 771. This was an act to amend the laws governing wastewater treatment plant operator certifications. This bill, you made some technical changes, and additionally, some changes regarding the training. You've reviewed the language already, and this was a unanimous committee report of ought to pass as amended. So the fiscal came back with minor cost increase from the general fund, minor cost increase from other special revenue funds, and any additional costs to the department as a result of changes to the laws regarding wastewater treatment plant operator certifications are anticipated to be minor and can be absorbed within existing budgeted resources. So if everybody's okay with that, we can get that reported out. The next one, just keep going unless somebody asks a question. All right.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So the next one up is, let me just get that language ready. There's too many tabs up on the screen at one time. All right. So the next one we have here is LD 988. This is a divided report. The majority report is ought not to pass, and then this is the minority ought to pass as amended report. This is a bill regarding originally an act to increase economic development by expanding the special fee application review process of the Department of Environmental Protection, but this was changed regarding the conflict of interest provision as it relates to outside reviewers of applications to DEP. So we again had a language review. Well, we didn't have a language review, but you had the language in front of you when you voted. It hasn't been changed. This one also is a minor cost increase, other special revenue funds, and again, can be absorbed within existing budgeted resources. And let's see. There we go. Let me get the next one ready. And I just lost all of them. Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
No problem. You have nice bird song in the background, Deirdre.
Yes, very, very noisy. The catbirds have been especially noisy lately. But they're fun to watch. And they're very photogenic as well. I'm just filling in this dead space here talking about birds. For some reason, when I'm loading a PDF and I'm on Zoom, it takes like 25 years, it seems like, to load. Okay, so the next one up is 1028. This is a unanimous committee report. Again, you have seen this language before, so it's no new language. It was removing 2 sections from the original bill relating to site law. And this too has a fiscal note, minor savings from the other special revenue fund, minor revenue decreases. So this bill would amend the site location of development laws to allow for exemptions from review if specific criteria are met. And the department anticipates this change will result in a small increase in projects that would be exempted from department review. So that would result in minor decrease in application fee revenue and minor savings from the decreased workload. And then try to get this loaded quickly. The last one's going to go super quick after this, I promise. Actually, I'm going to take them out of order because the last one loaded first. So we will do that.
Great.
Share screen. So this was this is 1161. So this one is seeing the language. There was a change from the vote from what you saw before. And so this was also a divided report. The majority is ought to pass as amended, and the minority is ought not to pass. And the only difference here in what you had reviewed when you voted this was a clarification in subsection 4D, paragraph A2. The language that says the restaurant expansion may not be located any closer to the water body or wetland than the existing restaurant. So before that language had said no closer to the water than other structures within the marina. And so your intention, my understanding was to limit that to sort of no closer than where the restaurant currently exists, so they couldn't expand closer to the water. So that's the only change. If that's satisfactory to those on the majority report, I can go ahead and get that in the loops with the revisor's office.
Yep.
And then the last one is LD 1038. This is also a divided report. The majority report is ought not to pass. The minority report is ought to pass as amended. And this one is regarding processing timetable for amended permits, and that it requires that the commissioner set a timetable for those amended permits. This has a fiscal note as well. Again, a minor cost increase from the general fund, any additional cost to the department as a result of establishing a processing timetable for amended permit applications for a permit issued under the site law, or requirement for when the processing period begins for amended permits are anticipated to be minor and can be absorbed within existing budgeted resources. So those are all the things I had. So those that had the fiscal and the language, those can be reported out today, can get out of the committee today. And then 1161 will go through the loops and get a fiscal note, and I'll come back with that when it's ready.
Thank you, Deirdre. Any questions at all about language review or anything else? All right, I believe that brings us to the end of our work for the day. Thank you, everyone. And we are back together again on Friday for additional work sessions at 10 a.m. Have a great afternoon.